Welcome to Friday. It just doesn't seem possible, but it's here already. Today, we are going to once again get into my very, very favorite series of books, our Notting Hill Editions Limited. But this time, we're going to be meeting and greeting none other than Oscar Wilde. And the book is Beautiful and Impossible Things. And it writes on the cover, what art really reveals to us is nature's lack of design, her curious crudities, her extraordinary monotony, her absolutely unfinished condition. Selected Essays of Oscar Wilde, introduced by Gyles Brandreth. And I do encourage you, when you do look through any of the volumes in this book, in this series, do look at the introductions carefully, because they do open a lot of windows for you. And I'm not going to read the entire introduction, but just a final paragraph or so of it. And it goes, to many today, Oscar is a gay icon who can do no wrong, but in truth, he was human, multifaceted, and no saint. Part of the tragedy of Oscar Wilde is that it is now almost impossible to view him except through the prism of his downfall. In 1931, his autobiography, the painter and illustrator Graham Robertson, 1866 through 1948, famous as the subject of one of John Singer Sargent's finest portraits, suggested that the real Oscar Wilde had disappeared beneath the tomb, a ponderous crag of stone erected to his memory at Père Lachaise in Paris. Forgotten were the boyish good humor, the almost childlike love of fun, the irresponsible gaiety and lightness of touch in which lay his unquestionable charm. The nimble-witted Irishman has vanished with the fastidious stringer of lovely words upon long melodious phrases, and gradually has been evolved a sinister figure, half sinner, half saint, unrecognizable to anyone who had known him, a creation of pure fiction, wholly foreign and mythical. The actual Oscar Wilde is no longer remembered. My hope is that you will find him again here in his prime, at his best, entertaining and diverting us with beautiful and impossible things. And just a brief refresher, in case you've forgotten some of the ins and outs of all of this. Oscar Wilde was born in Dublin in 1854. Interesting how many of our English literature figures had their start in Ireland, and is remembered for a diverse literary output. His novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, was actually made into a movie at one much later point. Stories for children, poetry, plays, including, which was on our own stage here at Amelia Community Theater, The Importance of Being Earnest, and a wide-ranging selection of essays and other prose works. He was faced with a libel suit, tried for gross indecency. Marquess of Queensberry had basically instigated this veritable tsunami that ended up with Wilde being in prison. His health never recovered, and he died a pauper in Paris in 1901 And I referenced that gravestone in Père Lachaise. There's a story even behind that. That wasn't immediately put there upon his demise. He was buried elsewhere. There was no money for Père Lachaise, a headstone. He was buried in a very poor place. And it was only after some publication money came in that the money was there to put the monument in place. And now, let me flip through to something that was written in 1885, Dinners and Dishes. And let me give you a little dictionary quest I went on. Ortholon is a word I was not familiar with. And I'm going to add to your gross factor on Friday. Ortholon is actually an Ortholon Bunting, a bird, lovely bird, that was really eaten as a delicacy. And listen to this, folks. You couldn't just sit down and eat it. No, you had to eat the whole thing except for the beak, which you spat out. And the way you did it was you put your head down to the plate, put your napkin over your head, and then, so you wouldn't offend anybody with what you were doing, you plopped that whole little bird like a popsicle into your mouth and ate the whole thing, except for the beak. And it was really considered quite a delicacy. And it was the EU declared it a protected species in 1979. Now, so when I say that particular word, ortolon, you'll know just what is really reflected in that. And we begin. A man can live for 3 days without bread, but no man can live for 1 day without poetry. It was an aphorism of Baudelaire's. You can live without pictures and music, but you can't live without eating, says the author of Dinners and Dishes. And this latter view is no doubt the more popular. Who indeed in these degenerate days would hesitate between an ode and an omelette, a sonnet and a salami? Yet the position is not entirely Philistine. Cookery is an art. Are not its principles the subject of South Kensington lectures? Does not the Royal Academy give a banquet once a year? Besides, as the coming democracy will no doubt insist on feeding us all on penny dinners, it is well that the laws of cookery should be explained. For were the national meal burned or badly seasoned or served up with the wrong sauce, a dreadful revolution might follow. Under these circumstances, we strongly recommend Dinners and Dishes to everyone. It is brief, concise, makes no attempts at eloquence, which is extremely fortunate. For even on ortolans, remember that word I gave you the definition? Who could endure oratory? It also has the advantage of not being illustrated. Subject of a work of art has, of course, nothing to do with its beauty, but still there is always something depressing about the colored lithograph of a leg of mutton. As regards the author's particular views, we entirely agree with him on the important question of macaroni. Never, he says, ask me to back a bill for a man who has given me a macaroni pudding. Macaroni is essentially a savory dish and may be served with cheese or tomatoes, but never with sugar and milk. There are also a useful description of how to cook risotto, a delightful dish too rarely seen in England, an excellent chapter on the different kinds of salads, which should be carefully studied by those many hostesses whose imaginations never pass beyond lettuce and beetroot. And actually, a recipe for making Brussels sprouts edible. Oh, the last is, of course, a masterpiece. The real difficulty, however, that we all have to face in life is not so much the science of cookery as the stupidity of cooks. And in this little handbook to practical Epicureanism, the tyrant of the English kitchen is shown in her proper light. Her entire ignorance of herbs, her passion for extracts and essences, her total inability to make a soup which is anything more than a combination of peppers and gravy, her inveterate habit of sending up bread poultices with pheasants. All these sins and many others are ruthlessly unmasked by the author. Ruthlessly and rightly. For the British cook is a foolish woman who should be turned for her iniquities into a pillar of salt, which she never knows how to use. But our author is not local merely. He has been in many lands. He has eaten Backhendel in Vienna, Kultebach in St. Petersburg. He has had the courage to face a buffalo veal of Romania and to dine with a German family at 1 o'clock. He has serious views on the right method of cooking those famous white truffles of Turin, of which Alexandre Dumas was so fond, and, in the face of the Oriental Club, declare that Bombay curry is better than the curry of Bengal. In fact, he seems to have had experience of almost every kind of meal, except the square meal of the Americans. This he should study at once. There is a great field for the philosophic epicure in the United States. Boston beans may be dismissed at once as delusions, but soft-shell crabs, terrapin, canvasback ducks, bluefish, and the pompano of New Orleans are all wonderful delicacies, particularly when one gets them at Delmonico's. Indeed, the two most remarkable bits of scenery in the United States are undoubtedly Delmonico's and the Yosemite Valley. And the former place has done more to promote a good feeling between England and America than anything else in this century. We hope that Wanderer will go there soon and add a chapter to Dinners and Dishes, and that his book will have in England the influence it deserves. There are 20 ways of cooking a potato and 365 ways of cooking an egg. Yet the British cook, up to the present moment, knows only 3 methods of sending up either one or the other. And now, when I did an adult education class, Page to the Stage, which was on the importance of being earnest, I had a group of students there who wanted to find out more about the play and about Oscar Wilde, and we really worked on it. And before I let them loose on the script, I played a game with myself. I took the script out in front of me and underlined every quotable quote, and I do mean quotable quote, that I found. And I discovered a technique in playwriting that I had never really heard about. But oh my goodness, it's true and it works. You can bounce from quote to quote. As a director, it's very useful because you know what to hit with your actors, what phrases to make the most important. It's just like in Shakespeare. If you read it carefully, properly, study the rhythms, Shakespeare has given you the director's way of approaching properly the script. Well, Oscar Wilde has done the same thing. Now, from the preface of The Picture of Dorian Gray, which was his novel, just a few things. The highest as the lowest form of criticism is a mode of autobiography. Another. There is no such thing as a moral or an immoral book. Books are well written or badly written. That is all. Those who go beneath the surface do so at their peril. From 1894. A few maxims for the instruction of the overeducated. Education is an admirable thing, but it is well to remember from time to time that nothing that is worth knowing can be taught. And it is a very sad thing that nowadays there is so little useless information. And in old days, books were written by men of letters and read by the public. Nowadays, books are written by the public and read by nobody. Friendship is far more tragic than love. It lasts longer. The only thing that the artist cannot see is the obvious. The only thing that the public can see is the obvious. The result is the criticism of the journalist. The only thing that can console one for being poor is extravagance. The only thing that can console one for being rich is economy. Oh, one should never listen. To listen is a sign of indifference to one's hearers. Those whom the gods love grow young. Phrases and Philosophies for the Use of the Young, from 1894. Wickedness is a myth invented by good people to account for the curious attractiveness of others. Those who see any difference between soul and body have neither. A really well-made buttonhole is the only link between art and nature. Dullness is the coming of age of seriousness. If one tells the truth, one is sure, sooner or later, to be found out. No, one should always be a little improbable. The only way for being occasionally a little overdressed is by being always absolutely overdressed. educated. Industry is the root of all ugliness. To love oneself is the beginning of a lifelong romance. All of these things in that one little book, and so much more. But I'm going to flip to a book from my library, personal library, which is selected works of Oscar Wilde. I wanted to share with you just a little bit before we end today, a little bit of the poetry of Oscar Wilde, because he did quite a bit of poetry. From the Ballad of Reading was a prison. That's where he was sent. Yet each man kills the thing he loves. By each let this be heard. Some do it with a bitter look, some with a flattering word. The coward does it with a kiss. The brave man with a sword. What a wonderful, wonderful philosophy he had. Requiescat. Tread lightly. She is near, under the snow. Speak gently. She can hear. The daisies grow. All her bright golden hair tarnished with rust. She that was young and fair, fallen to dust. Lily-like, white as snow, she hardly knew she was a woman, so sweetly she grew. Coffin board, heavy stone, lie on her breast. I vex my heart alone. She is at rest. Peace, peace. She cannot hear lyre or sonnet. All my life's buried here. Heap earth upon it. It was written in Avignon. Oh, as you might well imagine, he was a very successful playwright. I'm sure most of you have heard of the importance of being earnest, but he wrote a number of other plays, and he found great success there. And he wrote a series of poems, and I won't read them all, but one I will share with you. I mean, there was Phaedra to Sarah Bernhardt, and remember, this would have been of the time of Sarah Bernhardt. These were contemporaries. Portia to Ellen Terry, Queen Henrietta Maria to Ellen Terry, and he had quite a passion for Ellen Terry. Cama. This one, Fabian de Franchi to my friend Henry Irving. The silent room, the heavy creeping shade, the dead that travel fast, the opening door, the murdered brother rising through the floor, the ghost's white fingers on thy shoulders laid, and then the lonely duel in the glade. The broken swords, the stifled scream, the gore, thy grand revengeful eye when all is o'er. These things are well enough. But thou wert made for more august creation. Frenzied Lear should at thy bidding wander on the heath, with the shrill fool to mock him. Romeo, for thee should lure his love and desperate fear pluck Richard's recreant dagger from its sheath. Thou trumpet, set for Shakespeare's lips to blow. Boy, I wish somebody had said that to me. Nobody ever has. Oh, and one thing I did want to point out to you was the picture of Dorian Gray was also done as a magazine article. And for those of us who cherish literature and watch its paths, great magazines so oftentimes were featured first in the pages of magazines. And it was the 30s into the 40s, 1930, 1940, that this really stopped being such an issue. Sad to say, and it literally was into publishing and publishing companies and books. Everyone from Truman Capote to, just any of the authors. Dickens, think, for instance. Sherlock Holmes. Do you know that those wonderful Sherlock Holmes stories were printed first in magazines and then later gathered together as books? It really is a subject worth exploring to see just what impact magazines have had on literature. Maybe one of these days we'll delve into that, but it's apparent in all of the many different things I've been reading to you that so often Hemingway, just name an author, a famous one, Dorothy Parker, James Thurber, any of these people came first to magazines and then to the printer, the bookshelf, the bookseller, and the private library. And now, that is our exploration, however brief, into Oscar Wilde. I hope you've had a good time, and I hope this will inspire you to go to Story and Song and check out that Notting Hill Editions collection of books on just about any topic your heart desires. Read, explore, celebrate. Oh, and come back next Friday. And I think next Friday, we're doing something unusual. We're going to be having the launching of the very last book. Well, actually, this is the sixth very last book that I remember of a good friend of mine, a poet, Nola Perez. And we're going to be doing some readings from her poetry and talking and gathering some people at the time we normally would be gathered for our Friday event here at Story and Song. So that's going to be the focus, which we feature on next Friday. Till then, have a wonderful week.